cultural competency pathway takes you through 5 milestones, and the idea is that this would apply to any sort of diversity or difference that you might encounter, whether it's, we know that in independent schools, we have kids who come from very different socioeconomic backgrounds, as well as cultural backgrounds, linguistic backgrounds, learning styles, racial, all types. For the most part, many of the activities focus on, from the racial perspective of diversity and cultural competence, but all of the activities are designed such that you can use them for any particular type of diversity that you want to try to encourage, or equity that you want to discuss and bring into the classroom. So the introduction is really that. It's an introduction to your personal work on yourself and your identity, and the assumption that we all have identities, and the work that we all need to do understanding who we are and where we come from, and the fact that our backgrounds are such that we go through the world with a film in front of us that's colored by our life experience. And I loved, in one of the books I was reading, that talked about how your cultural identity is the software that runs your hardware, right? So it's really what's processing everything behind the scenes that we aren't aware of. I always laugh because my head of my middle school is from the South, and I am from Connecticut, and I will often go into her office and just start talking, and she'll say, well, hi, hello, how are you? I'm fine. How are you today? So as a gentle reminder that as a New Englander, I tend to be like, let's get to business, let's do it, let's keep moving, my type A personality. And her Southern sensibilities are more about building that other piece in. So these are the 5 milestones. Am I culturally competent? Why does it matter? What are the challenges? And this takes you through things like, what's stereotype threat? What is cultural appropriation? Addressing the challenges. What types of work in ourselves and in the classroom will actually help us to be more aware? And this goes through things like listening, validating, really empathizing and hearing what other people are saying. What's neuroscience got to do with it? So I read a really fabulous book by Zaretta Hammond that talked a lot about how many of our schools are not serving our linguistically and racially and socioeconomically diverse students, because with a lack of, for a better word, voice and choice and interest, and those things that spark engagement through using mind-brain education techniques, we're losing a lot of those children in terms of their interest level. And then the last one is building inclusive classrooms, some of the systems and the ways you can set up your classroom to be more inclusive. So as we go through the pathway, a lot of it is personal reflection, at least in the beginning, and a little bit of explanation of how you might apply this in another context in your school. So that's...
I remember that one of the things that I saw in here was this whole concept of implicit bias. Can you say a few words about that?
Yeah, so I think that's in the what are the challenges, right? So unconscious bias, and that really ties into what we're talking about in terms of the culture being the software that runs your hardware. So implicit bias is really when we believe that everybody else's experience has been akin to ours, when we aren't able to think about how somebody else might be experiencing the world and then it might be very different. We make assumptions about people in all sorts of ways, right? So that can be from the assumption that if a Black man is jogging in your neighborhood, he's just stolen something. Or it can be the implicit bias that because a student's first language is in English, they're not as smart because they don't sound as educated. Those are just 2 egregious examples. But so there's some really good videos that I was able to find and pull in on some of these things, as well as articles, and then activities that I pulled from a wide variety of websites and other places that it'll link you to experience.